I guess I just wanted to take some time to speak to myself. And I guess it's a bit strange for some to see it this way, because for whatever reason one wants to believe that I don't speak to myself. But of course I do speak to myself. The only way I'm able to speak is to speak to myself. The only way I can communicate is to speak to myself. And I guess for a long time, I didn't know what it meant to speak. And the only time I did understand when to speak was amongst my really close childhood friends. But I mean, outside of that, it was difficult for me to speak because I didn't really understand how to speak. You know, there's times when I was younger when people would say, "Oh, you don't talk that much, you don't speak that much." And I actually kind of got that just kind of growing up in and out. And I realized the reason why I didn't speak was because I didn't know how to. And when I was trying to learn how to speak, since I was only speaking to myself, when I would speak, it was as if no one was listening. So I tried to understand why one would not listen if one is oneself. So within this, I was trying to not only knowingly speak to myself all the time, but I was also learning by listening to what was speaking to me, whom one did not see as myself. So I learned different traits, different characteristics, different acts. And I came to realize that in order for me to interact with some, whom some would not, yes, with some, one would have to learn how to pretend not to be oneself. And that's when I learned how to do the act of pretend. And I would only say that the only reason why one would do this is because not necessarily feeling alone, but one wanted to interact, one wanted to play, one wanted to see all these other things that are going on. Hello? And the only way for me to interact, touch, play, and feel the one that does not see one as oneself one would have to pretend. And there are some places where I forgot that I was pretending, because I thought the pretend would draw me nearer to those that are pretending, but it did not. I mean, sure, there may have been some form of interaction, but the depth of interaction was very unreal, and unreal in a way because we both knew that we were both pretending. I knew that I was pretending. They knew that they were pretending. That we were not one speaking to oneself. But then there was moments when we would actually speak as if one was speaking to oneself, and this would bring in the friendship when one was speaking to oneself. When one is speaking to oneself, one would only be able to speak to oneself if one understands oneself. So the only reason why one can communicate with oneself is because one is feeling. One feels what they feel. And since one feels what they feel, one sees what they feel. One tastes what they feel. One hears what they feel. One feels that they hear. One feels that they see. One feels that they feel. One feels what they smell. One smells what they feel. One sees what they feel. One feels what they see. It's the only way one could speak to one. The only way one could speak to oneself is by feeling oneself. Once one feels, one senses. When one senses, one makes distinctions through translation. One repeats sound. One repeats sound. One repeats sound. Man sees, so man makes symbols. One sees, so one makes symbols. Female sees, so female makes symbols. One makes symbols. One gives symbol sound. Symbols of letters, symbols of words. One is only able to speak to oneself. One can only speak to oneself. So for one to speak to oneself, one has to feel. And from feeling, one sees, one touches, one feels, touch, feel. One hears, one smells, one tastes. One makes a sound. And in seeing, one says, in making distinction, to share with oneself. From seeing, tree. This seeing will be given the sound tree. To remind oneself, one uses symbol by seeing. One gives the symbol the sound tree. The symbol is the sound, now in memory. As this process goes on, one creates and as one creates, one will speak to oneself. One will and only can speak to oneself.